This video was brought to you by Brilliant, and the first 200 people to use the link below will get 20% off an annual premium subscription. We've told this story in countless videos by this point, but when the war started in Ukraine, many expected Russia to take Kyiv within days, and then install a puppet government in the capital. After all, while Russia might only be a medium-sized power when it comes to its economic or diplomatic might, the country seemed strong militarily. I mean, since 2008, the country has invaded Georgia and Ukraine twice, as well as fighting in Syria. Not only that, but Putin's mercenaries have been found fighting in Libya, the Central African Republic, and in the last few weeks, Ukraine too. However, the war in Ukraine has forced many to question the assumption that Russia is even a military power. Over the last few months, Putin's military have only been able to capture one major city, Kherson, plus what remains of Mariupol and sections of Donbass, a region that was already partially controlled by Russian-backed separatists. It's certainly not the great success that many expected from a so-called global military power. And the cost of even these modest victories has been significant. Not only has millions of dollars worth of equipment been lost and destroyed, but around 15,000 Russian soldiers have also been killed. So, what's happened? How has a country once feared for its military might fallen so hard in this conflict? And what's so wrong with Russia's military that instead of walking over Ukraine as expected, victories have now been confined to pretty minor wins? Well, let's explain that right now. To properly understand Russia's current military woes, we need to wind the clock back to 1994, if not earlier. Following a declaration of independence by Chechnya and a series of failed coups and military operations, in December 1994, the then Russian president Boris Yeltsin had had enough and ordered the military to employ all means at the state's disposal to quash Chechen demands for independence and restore constitutional order. Yeltsin had hoped that the sheer strength and might of the Russian army would be able to effortlessly destroy the Chechen separatists. But boy, was he wrong. Rather than a quick, sharp conflict, the First Chechen Wars rumbled on for nearly 2 years, achieving none of Russia's principal aims, and ending solely when Yeltsin's national security advisor reached an agreement to stop the fighting with the Chechens. Fast forward to 2008, Russian forces were preparing to invade Georgia, but following the disastrous First Chechen War, commentators expected another disastrous invasion. But in just a matter of days, Russian forces had managed to occupy some 20% of Georgian territory before a ceasefire was agreed. Yet, even this fast-paced and seemingly successful invasion did have its problems. Although Russia did win, it was less due to the prowess of Russia's armed forces, and more due to the fact that Georgia's armed forces were just weaker and less well managed. Under the surface of Russia's win lay huge failings and a comparative weak performance. At one point, Russia even allegedly lost contact during the height of the conflict with their own defense minister for upwards of 10 hours. But following these failings in both the Chechen War and now in Georgia, Russia said that they wouldn't allow this to happen again. Or so they hoped. Following the war in Georgia, Russia undertook extensive efforts to modernize and upgrade their armed forces. A Congressional Research Service explainer from July 2020 highlighted that in the years ahead, these efforts are expected to continue focusing on modernizing military equipment, as well as improving combat readiness and coordination across service branches. And because of that, on the face of it, Russia shouldn't be losing right now. When compared to the French or British army, let alone the Ukrainian one, the Russian military looks formidable. In 2021, military spending in Russia topped some $250 billion US. For context, France and Britain were in the region of $100 billion. American intelligence therefore genuinely believed that following an invasion, Kyiv would fall in a matter of days, while European intelligence were only slightly more optimistic, saying that it might hold out for a few weeks. Instead, some 9 weeks after the start of the invasion, Kyiv has welcomed the British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, EU Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, and the US's top diplomat, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and top defense official, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin. So, Kyiv certainly isn't lost, and major figures aren't even scared to go. So why is Russia's invasion of Ukraine, an invasion conducted on their own schedule, and after modernization, been so catastrophic? Why isn't Russia the major military power we once thought it was? Well, firstly, just because you're spending a boatload of cash on your military doesn't mean that A, it's actually being spent well on your military, and B, it's actually being spent on the military at all. Russian equipment has, in spite of billions in investment, just failed or been overhyped. In 2015, Russian forces fired 26 Caliber missiles at targets in Syria. 4 of them ended up hitting Iran, and for the avoidance of doubt, Iran isn't in Syria, not even close. And if we focus solely on the conflicts in Ukraine, analysis by US intelligence points towards Russian missiles having a failure rate as high as 60%. To put that in perspective, experts talking to Reuters said that any failure rate above 20% would be considered high. Part of the issue, though, is as simple as corruption. Transparency International stresses that Russia's defense sector is at high risk of corruption, owing to extremely limited external oversight of the policies, budgets, activities, and acquisitions of defense institutions. In fact, not a single Russian defense company, let alone state-owned corporation, scores anything more than a low commitment to anti-corruption. Speaking practically, in 3 of the 5 operational risk categories assessed by Transparency International, Russian military forces score 0. Military doctrine, forward planning, and corruption monitoring in operations all score nothing, and are all things that the Russian forces seem to have failed at during their invasion of Ukraine. Putting aside both money and corruption, though, there's also the simple fact that the smart tactics being used by Ukrainians are working. Take the Moskva, the flagship of Russia's Black Sea Fleet. On paper, the vessel is basically undefeatable, having 3 layers of air defense, a series of batteries to shoot down both long and short-range targets, and automated AK-630 Gatling guns to, in the words of The Economist, throw a wall of lead at anything that got too close. Yet, on the 18th of April, it sunk. If you trust Russian reports, ammunition on board exploded in an unexplained fire. Ukraine, on the other hand, claims that the vessel was struck by a Ukrainian Neptune vessel, which was later confirmed by unnamed US officials. So how on earth did Ukrainian missiles allegedly bring down the crown jewels of Russia's navy? Well, according to a colonel talking to The Economist, Ukraine simply flew TB2 drones near the vessel to distract those on board. A distraction which, due to the lack of flanking support by other vessels, because Russia underestimated the Ukrainian fleet, proved to be fatal. Despite being Russia's flagship vessel, the Moskva was nearly 40 years old when it sunk, with incredibly elderly and clearly deficient defense systems that just weren't up to scratch. And these hardware issues have been further compounded for the military due to a lack of trust or even commitment to the invasion. Putin ultimately kept invasion plans away from senior military officials, making proper scrutiny, assessment, and more importantly, preparation just impossible. Troops on the ground have also lost faith in the cause, in part due to their failure to make any substantive headway, something which ultimately leads to a vicious cycle. And in the end, when you're fighting with a doggedly determined opponent, with Ukrainians stepping up to the plate to defend their country and their democracy, sheer determination can be stronger than even the best military's weapons. Whatever can be said about the strength of the Russian military, though, Putin won't want this invasion to go the same way as the Chechen conflicts which brought him into office. He was likely hoping pre-war that new technological advances and online misinformation efforts would help his cause, especially when it comes to his domestic audience. But these too have disappointed many. Russia seemingly went from the power which could disrupt elections worldwide to one that has very few on their side. And it seems that, like the Chechen conflict, history might be doomed to repeat itself. However, for the rest of you, if you want to brush up on your technological skills and advance your STEM knowledge, then you should check out Brilliant. That's everyone but Russian operatives though. You're banned from looking. That's because Brilliant is the online STEM learning platform that allows you to get smarter every day by learning huge important topics through engaging and interactive experiences. Gone are the long boring lectures that I sat through to get my computer science degree. Instead, replaced by puzzles and interactive experiences, which teach you the knowledge you need to know in a way you actually want to learn. It really is all the knowledge you could need too, because Brilliant have courses from the very basics of computer science and maths right through to neural networks, quantum computing, and even quantitative finance to help you better understand financial markets. All of these courses are designed by award-winning instructors and built upon the principle of active learning, so you're gaining STEM knowledge by actually doing it. So if you want to improve with STEM, then you can sign up to Brilliant at brilliant.org/TLDR EU. And the first 200 people to do so will get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Thanks for supporting the channel.